Welcome to the Loaf Podcast. This is a podcast for genuinely good people with a bit of an edge. People who want to help other people, unique people with a unique purpose. Our purpose is to find out what makes people tick, what's held them back and what's pushed them forwards. I'd love this to be as interactive as possible. So if you're watching on YouTube, please have a go in the comments and please read the show notes. Thanks to my sponsors, Verve Estates and Property Management, Darlington's finest estate agents and property managers. Neon Source, which is a sourcing company matching investors to properties, and also The Property Thing, which is the North's finest property networking event with a bit of business chucked in there as well. Thank you so much. Please enjoy. Welcome to episode 7 of the Loaf Podcast. I'm here today with Sir Anthony Boyce, who isn't really a sir, by the way.
I should be.
Yes, a Rear Admiral. So he's my co-host in The Property Thing. So when we get a Property Thing guest up, who is this week Paul Shamplina off of the Tellybox, right? So I'm really chuffed to get Paul on because he's a spicy old character. He reminds me a lot of myself with his spiciness and his ways of going on camera, being very firm with, So he does Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords on the telly, which is, I did a couple of episodes just to get refreshed, and I was absolutely hooked. I went on the extreme edition on YouTube, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, you know when you've got like half an hour to do a bit of research and I'm there for 2 hours. Yeah, absolutely buzzing. So welcome, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me to Darlington, my first time I've been here.
Oh really?
Yes.
Fair play.
Yes.
You were quite not a difficult guy to get on board, but you have your boundaries. And you've got your ways of going on. Like normally people are like, oh, the Property Thing, the most popular property networking event in the country. Of course I'll come there. And you're like that. Well, you weren't hard to get necessarily, but you were, you had.
I've got lots going on.
Yeah, you have got lots going on, mate. And I want you to tell me about that from start to finish. About where you started off, leaving school. The problems, any problems that you've had. I mean, We aren't a property podcast, but it's starting to sound very much like one because of the amount of people that I get on who, in my world, are from the property world. So I don't want to talk about property too much. I also want to get this kind of mental well-being and, traits and all of that kind of stuff and what's led you to being you.
Yeah.
So tell us, give us 5 minutes on your journey.
Oh, geez, right. Okay, so... moved around a little bit from where I grew up. Left North London, went back to North London at 8 years old, then moved to a place called East Grinstead near Gatwick Airport, then moved to Brighton, then moved back to London, Edgware, at 18. Left school at 16, no qualifications. Dare I say it, I actually paid someone to do an O-level for me, O-level art. I thought that would help me. Obviously, didn't do fuck all for me, to be honest. Best thing I did at school, actually, from when I ended up setting my own business, was typing. I did Pitman 1, Pitman 2, RSA 1, believe it or not. And the only reason I did that, because it was a room full of girls. I was like the only boy in the class. But I just wanted to work. I was always a grafter. My dad was always a graft, didn't come from money, to be honest. And I wanted to get into fast food management. I don't know why. I worked in a burger bar when I was about 13 in East Grinstead. And I don't know what, but anyway, I didn't want to wear the uniforms, so I didn't do that. Didn't get my qualifications. I ended up going for a job as an outdoor clerk in a firm of solicitors called Don Mullen and Haddock. They were the biggest law firm in Sussex, and I started work in 87. I was 16, 87, and of course you had 87 to 90 was the recession, 15% unemployment, 15% interest rates, 3 million unemployment, and I worked as an outdoor clerk, so I was going to court, issuing claims, and then I did my first court hearing at 16 years old, which was a bit unheard of then. I always had confidence. I had a real desire. I had friends with money, and my really good friends had money. They came from money. Money makes money. I never had that, so I know I had to work. I made loads of mistakes when I was younger, like we all do. Squandered money, go out, was a bit of a party boy and all that type of stuff. But I'd always had jobs and worked in the Grand Hotel in Brighton, the one that got bombed, obviously after it got bombed. Did room service. My sister got me a job there. That was a bit of an experience. And then worked in this law firm. Worked in this law firm for 3 years, and then I got a job. I saw a job as a litigation executive and moved to back to London and worked in a law firm in Camden for a one-man band, but got loads of experience. So I'd be doing court hearings, I'd be doing a bit of probate, I'd be doing conveyancing. I remember at 18 years old, 18 years old, I sat behind counsel at the Old Bailey on an armed robbery for a juvenile, and I had to make a bail application. Never done a bail application in my life before, and I remember the judge saying that I was one of the youngest people to ever come before an Old Bailey judge, and it was a simple application. But I had a lot of confidence, and a lot of that confidence, I believe, has helped me to my later life, doing public speaking, doing media, from standing up and speaking before a judge, believe it or not. But I was never cut out to be a solicitor. Wasn't academic at all. Really wasn't academic.
But you obviously got your paperwork right, because in those words,
I got my
you've got to
paperwork
get your
right.
paperwork
I was drafting claims. Yeah, I issued my first possession claim while working in solicitors in 1991. So that's how far back I go. But I was doing loads of different things. I got loads of different experience. I set my first business up when I was 18, 19, which was a private investigation and process serving business while working in the solicitors. And I got my dad involved, and we got a contract with the Customs and Excise serving all the bankruptcy demands. So that was the first business I started with my dad, who ironically today at 80 years old still works for me.
Fair play.
He works in Landlord Action. He's been working for 22, 23 years. Started Landlord Action 24 years ago. He goes to serve all the notices for us when landlords pay.
What would your dad say about you? Apart from like he's my blue-eyed boy and he's great and all of that kind of stuff, on a personal level, would he say you were a stubborn guy? You're very
he'd say
direct.
I lack patience, and that's something that I'm quite aware of. I think he's proud. He's proud of me, and I've always had. I've employed quite a few family members. That's really challenging as well, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. What would he say about me? He'd say I've got a lot of energy. Sometimes I don't listen. I've got wiser as I've got older, but I've made a lot of mistakes. And then, yeah, what else? My journey. There's loads more stuff. Maybe we'll come out in the rest of this podcast. But yeah, and I, after working in law firms, I left my old law firm in 1995. And I left that law firm to become a certified bailiff and a private investigator. And I went to go and work for this guy, and he promised me the world, and it didn't happen. And it really affected me financially. I bought my first flat at 22, 23 years old, 40 grand, one-bed flat in London, North London. And had to rent. I went to live with an ex-girlfriend at the time, but I was renting the flat because I was so skint. And I started a business called Shamplina and Associates from a fun table of an ex-girlfriend's house.
Where's that name from, by the way, Shamplina?
Everyone thinks it's Italian. It's not. It's Eastern European immigrants coming over 3 generations ago that come over. So it's quite a unique name. In fact, because I got a son. My son's called Rocco. I've got 3 sisters and 2 cousins, both girls. So thankfully, my name can carry on when I had a son. Really.
Yeah, fair play.
But yeah.
How did you end up on the Tellybox then?
So what happened was, and I was going to write a post on LinkedIn actually last Sunday, and I didn't do it. I was going to do it about outreach and how it did. So I got into TV. So when I started Landlord Action in 2000, the reason I started Landlord Action was I was evicting bad tenants when I was working at Shamplina Associates, working for a law firm, and I evicted 25 or 28, I can't remember, illegal immigrants in a 3-bed house in North London for my mate, who ended up becoming my partner in Landlord Action. He was a letting agent, and he was paying a lot of money to evict tenants at the time. And I said, no, it's easy. You can do it for fixed fees and 3 steps. And out of that, we started Landlord Action in 2000. And then what happened was I started embracing media in 2001 because really the pinnacle of how I understood PR and how I gathered PR from an early age in Landlord Action was we sent out, I remember to this day, I used to have an office in Kentish Town in North London near Camden, and we sent out about 4,000 brochures to letting agents, and I was sealing them in my little office, me and my mate. And Mirabar Halal from the Evening Standard, who was the chief journalist at Evening Standard, and the Evening Standard in those days was a proper newspaper, not like now, and she saw this brochure and she said, in the headline, a blessing for landlords. We had a half-a-page edge saw in the Evening Standard, which was ginormous. We had the best part of over 15,000 calls from it. over the course of time.
And how many of the was you?
There was only me and my mate, and then we got someone in, and I was serving the notices. It was mental. It was some good times. It's good times, and it was still when I was doing a bit of crime investigation work, and the crime investigation work, which you haven't really talked to me about. We did some colourful things with that as well, which maybe you want to come through and ask me after, especially the process serving and being threatened with knives, had a gun pulled on me and all that stuff. But then when I started Landlord Action, but then when we had these calls, and I thought, Jesus, PR works, and then I understood that, and then we got contacted by Carlton TV or Thames TV in those days to do a TV program. I think it was in 2002. Then I did my first talk in 2001, and it was about buy to let. And they came to my old office in Mill Hill. It was a serviced office, and I was in that office for about 16 years until we sold the business to Hamilton Fraser. And I thought, right, perception's really important. And then, on TV, I had no media training. My partner, we both went on it, and I thought it's going to generate business. And that's all I thought about when I was doing talks and I was doing all this outreach stuff, business. And it's not costing me anything. And one of the guys that came in and helped us in Landlord Action was a marketeer. He was brilliant at marketing. He invented the word landlording, which you see out there now, and the landlord's friend and all that stuff. And we really, and in those days, we used to have our marketing, you can't do it now, was we'd have a boot on our marketing, which was fictions, which you can't do now. So we were really ahead of the game doing stuff. And then I did this TV program, and then what happened was, because I wanted us to be busy, look like busy, the God's honest truth, I got a couple of people to come in to make out the employee. One of them was an actress who was a mate of mine, and then I'd get people to call up the phones to make sure we were busy while we were filming. And then I'd call up the phone, Landlord Action, can I help you? And then my mate goes, and he was like, right, oh, you got a problem with a tenant, that. So we would just start generating. But that's kind of like how I understood PR and TV, and then did loads and loads of radio. And then while I did a radio show for 15 weeks on LBC called The Property Hour, which was, at that time I was doing work with Direct Line. I was doing some ambassador work with Direct Line. And that was the same year that I got contacted to do Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords. But before I'd done Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords, I'd done quite a few TV programmes. It was massive on ITV, called the From Hell, Holidays from Hell, Weddings from Hell. They did Tenants from Hell. It was a 1 hour special, and it was massive. That was just a 1 hour. And then I did a program called, what was it? I can't remember, Trouble on the Door, Landlord. There was other TV programs, small 1 or 2 piece programs, but Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords was the biggest. So I did about 64 episodes.
You didn't do many up north, did you?
I did a few. So I did Stockton-on-Tees.
Right.
That was 6 years rent arrears, believe it or not.
Wow. Yeah.
Knocked on the door at 6 o'clock in the morning. But all those stories were Landlord Action stories that I did. They're not all fabricated. They're all proper stories. And I was still running a business. So, I'm a workaholic. I still am a workaholic now. But yeah, and what I did, I tell you, I did one in Stockton-on-Tees, and I did another one in the northeast in I can't remember.
Was it Gateshead? Did you do one?
No, it wasn't Gateshead. It was I can't remember the name of the area. It was a London investor that bought something up here,
right?
And they were Nightmare Tenants, and they ended up saying, "Oh, you're going to need security." And I knocked on the door, and it was this little old woman that was just giving me a bit of abuse and whatever. And it wasn't that, but I did a couple of stories in North East. Did a lot of Manchester. Did one in Liverpool. Yeah, I did them all over the place. It was a lot of filming, because don't forget, when you're filming, Paul, you're serving a notice, the tenant doesn't leave, then you're filming it when it goes to court, and then you're filming it when there's bailiff eviction. So I'd normally come in step 1 and step 3, and then they film our advocate, because we do about 40 to 50 hearings a month at Landlord Action. And then, of course, you have to condense the story into 3 minutes, but really it's 6 months
or something. Yeah.
6 months. But it's a lot of filming. And then when I did Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords, it just got really big. It's the biggest thing that I've ever done. And then I did the last day's filming, literally 4 days, just before lockdown. I did one bit in a disused pub, which was some interview stuff, and then it stopped. And but they repeat it non-stop, and I actually get texts and fan mail from all over. Not a lot, just odds here and there, but people that watch it in America and big in Australia, and
fan mail. You ever had any knickers or bras sent?
No, I'm not Tom Jones really. I've had a few comments that I've got beautiful blue eyes.
Yeah,
but that's about it. But I think they've and it's nice that people appreciate. I think that when I made the decision, obviously we had lockdown and COVID changed everything, and I struggled mental health wise, and we can talk about that as well in the first lockdown. But just to be appreciated, because I wanted to do a program, and I learned by media that when you do media, there's normally an agenda. And I wanted to make sure that, I got this title of landlord's friend and sticking up for landlords. I only rented out a couple of properties myself or whatever, and didn't build a portfolio because I stuck everything into my business. I remortgaged my house, I made business. I did other businesses and stuff like that. And but I understood media, but I liked the balance. I mean, I knew it was Channel 5, so I knew it was a certain type of programme, and it came out at the same time as Can't Pay Would Take It Away. And they both show both.
I used to love that Can't Pay, Take It Away. There's a little bit of, I don't know, having been a landlord myself for 30 years, when you see people being removed from properties or having to pay the dues after they've treated the landlord like a piece of shit, whatever. I mean, obviously it's a double-edged sword, right? Yeah. Hence the Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords. Yeah. There's some terrible landlords out there.
There's some shocking landlords out there.
But I mean, you are going back to your PR thing. You are a bit of a walking, talking personal brand.
Yeah,
and I think because you're quite quirky and spicy, and you had your Mohican. You've always had a bit of a Mohican going on as well,
yeah.
And so you like, it was interest, But was there someone else doing a program as well like that? I'll tell you for why. Because I think it was maybe when your guys were filming up at Stockton, they were staying in one of my serviced apartments in Darlington. And I used to do this crazy thing where I used to actually go and meet all of my guests, thinking I was a very good
host.
Yeah, I'd only just started off, and I wanted to get a 10 out of 10 on whatever for as long as possible, and all of that kind of stuff. And it kind of worked.
It's because you cared.
But I was chatting to them, and we got on talking about Clause 24 and tenants and
Section 24.
And then I got a call off the TV company saying, "Would you like to come on to this other program that we're doing regarding blah blah blah?" And I thought, "Oh no, I'm going to get my landlord pants pulled down."
Was it our program?
Was it called something like Meridian or something? The company that produced it?
Yeah, well, our one was Bright Stocks, which was owned by Leopard Films, which made Cash in the Attic. But there was a lot of films. I mean, I got contacted loads of times, and when I was doing Nightmare Tenants, it was the only reason I did it was to think about my business and bring more business, and to educate and not show that every landlord drives a Bentley or a Rolls Royce and they're all wealthy. They're just normal people. Mm-hmm. But the stories that came on the show, Paul, are stories of landlords generally that don't know what they're doing, try and fully manage, which is the hardest thing ever to do. Don't understand about compliance, don't understand you've got to put deposit scheme. The law only came in 2007, or they didn't fully reference or get rent guarantee insurance. Simple mistakes, Some
landlords are their own worst enemy, aren't they?
They are their own worst enemy, because cheap is always expensive, and I don't care whatever. Yeah. I use that motto in anything. And they were stories generally. What I wanted to do is I really focused and spent a lot of time on it. And it was at the time, I did it for 2 years. And then when I sold the business in 2017 to Hamilton Fraser, Hamilton Fraser, as I said to you off air, we own My Deposits, Property Redress Scheme, Client Money Protect. We had lots of different. I had a bit more resource around me, so I had more time to do more episodes. Because when you're travelling up and down and running a business and you've got staff, it's difficult. It's a commitment. And then, of course, you don't know what you're dealing with. And then, of course, you get a bit of aggro and stuff like that. But I was trained to do that because I used to be a bailiff. And when you're a certified bailiff trying to collect council tax or VAT debts and some of the worst council estates in London. I mean, I remember once when I had to serve, when I was skint, and that's why you never forget and you appreciate things and always treat people like you want to be spoken to, And I'm a big advocate for that. I don't care who you are, just it's about respect. Respect is everything to me.
You are always calm on the doorstep. I've noticed.
Yeah, it is.
You never lose your shit.
You can lose your shit, and it's really hard. I mean, I can tell you a couple of stories where being a process server. I mean, I remember once I had to go and serve it was in Peckham or Lewisham, really rough council estate. I was getting 80 quid. This is before Landlord Action. Didn't have money for a car. Eventually had some money. I mean, I was skint because I was let down from this job and I had to rent out. And then what am I going to do? And I ended up starting my business, which ended up turning into Landlord Action. So blessing, but I've always taken risks. And, I remember the days when I had 10p electric on the, and all that stuff. And but I remember I had to go and serve this domestic violence injunction on this guy who was about 6 foot, God knows what, walk up these flats. And I'd gone 2 train journeys and a bus for whatever, all for 80 quid, right? 11 o'clock at night, because that's when he's in after shift work, knocking on his door, and he ended up chasing me, and, you know, I'd done some mad stuff. So you do stuff like that. But, I mean, with Nightmare Tenants and Slum Landlords, aggravation, we had about 2 or 3. We had one where we had a Romanian gang that was subletting in East London. East London with the work. I mean, subletting's horrendous, and I can talk to you about it in more detail. I'm doing quite a bit of work on that with a prop tech company at the moment called Title Guardian. But I remember with Nightmare Tenants, we had High Court sheriffs turn up, and it all kicked off. Thankfully, the police turned up. It depends where you are, if you call the police. And then I've had to deal with squatting as well. Squatting can be a bit naughty as well. I had one quite colourful episode with some Italian squatters, and it all kicked off. But that's like another life before Landlord Action. So Landlord Action was a bit easier because if you knew it was going to kick off, there might be security there. But I remember one story. Well, there was a few, but I remember one story where one of my really good mates, he's a music producer, and I sit with him at Tottenham, and he had a tenant owed him £8,000 for a lovely flat in Hampstead, North West London, beautiful area, really expensive, and he got done by a subletting crew and a dodgy agent, and this guy was called Muhammad Ali, ironically, and I like boxing, and this guy, we went there, and he lost his don't forget, when you're there, people don't realise they won't lose it with me, they lose it with a cameraman. Because they're being filmed, being exposed. So for me, it was about exposing dodgy tenants. We don't have a serial bad tenant database, which we're not allowed to have, and all that stuff. And I didn't like people taking advantage. And the worst type of tenants were serial bad tenants that would go from one property to another. So I'd like to try and name and shame them a little bit. I thought it was my duty. But come with that, you get a bit of aggro. And then what happened? This guy lost it. He was throwing shoes at us, so we had to retreat. And you could see it. It's on one of the episodes. And my mate's got the CCTV of it. So my mate shit himself and he ran off. And this guy came for me. And you have to keep your cool. You have to keep your cool. And this guy, he spat at me, which is the lowest, isn't it? And then he tried to kick me and I blocked him. And my mate said to me, he says, your jaw was going. I was like, ready to go. And I had to keep my calm and whatever because it was on camera. But generally, we didn't get a lot of aggro, because people didn't want to be exposed. Bit different to Can't Pay Will Take It Away because that was a more confrontational and they were going in people's homes, I wouldn't go in someone's home until the bailiff turned up or the High Court sheriff turned up because you've got a legal document and then you go in and, what the state of the properties are and stuff.
So what is it about, you've got your uniform, haven't you? I mean, you all seem to wear black bailiffs. Is that a thing? Like you're all like Johnny Cash?
Maybe because we want to look thinner. Right, the camera. Okay. But I think, so what I did was I kind of like built a brand up for the business. And then, of course, subsequently I built my own brand up and stuff. And I use that, for work and, it creates business for, our company and stuff. But, you have a uniform. And what I did was with TV, because they block out your signage. You can imagine having a signage for 50,
I know.
So you play the game a little bit. So what I did was I had my mate Darryl. So I said to him, you're going to come and assist me at evictions and we both wear jackets and be in shop with me so you get double brand. So you play the game. So, TV companies use you as much as you kind of like use
Absolutely.
them. And it's edit, so I talk about edit and you talk about other stuff, and, as landlords, we are going through an uncertain time and I think, landlord confidence is at an all-time low. That's without a doubt. But I agreed to go on. I've been on all, Inside Out, on the One Show, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5. I've done all of them. And I remember there was a Panorama and I'd get a call. And to be fair, talk about PR, just another thing. I must actually, and I'll say it openly, I mean, if you look at the NRLA, they do a great job. And you look at Ben Beadle, and someone that's thrown himself, I know he has a different hat and a different sphere to whatever, but someone that's embraced PR for the good of trying to highlight landlording, because we're not deemed as a profession, which is part of the problem as well, which we need to be, and it has to come from him. But I remember going on Panorama, and I got him in our studio, I got him in our office in Bournemouth, and it was a very tenant-centric thing, and this is where the word non-fault came from, non-fault eviction. And it came from that programme. And I said, it's not non-fault. There's always a reason why a landlord serves a notice. Landlords don't go out serving notices, making families homeless for the sake of it. And I was on that episode. It was the episode when they were talking about Fergus Wilson serving loads of Section 21 notices in the street and why they're doing it. And that's where, from from that TV piece, it gained momentum about non-fault and stuff like that. And I was on there for 17 seconds, but I knew the agenda. I knew it'd get cut.
Yeah.
So I've done that loads and loads of times. You know, it was like when I went on to ITV News not long ago, and I said I didn't want to do any more evictions. I'm not going to do that. Not at a time of cost of living. It's done now. I won't do it. I don't feel comfortable doing it. And Dan Hewitt from ITV News was talking about social housing and the problem with, you know, LHA and all that type of stuff. And he goes, can you serve a notice? I said, I don't really want to do it now. I've stopped doing that after Nightmare Tenants. And he goes, please. So I end up serving a notice. So I served this notice, and the edit was Paul Shamplina serving eviction notice 7 days before Christmas. Right. So I looked, what did I look like? You know, complete SHIT. But actually, it didn't tell you there was £17,000 rent arrears owing to the landlord that owns one flat and is living abroad and he's struggling financially. Of course, that doesn't come out in the wash because all landlords, obviously,
I did an
wealthy.
eviction last year, just before Christmas, and but she owed me about $5,000. And the thing is that gets you as a landlord a lot of the time is the lack of communication, the lack of sitting down and doing a deal. I got one girl in court one time and she didn't turn up. The judge mentioned that he thought that she'd said that I'd bullied her, and I said, hold on. Both times I went round, she'd moved out of one of my houses, owed me a load of money, moved to another house. I found out where that was. I knocked on the door a couple of times. Both times her prop forward for Darlington First's boyfriend was stood behind her, a little bit quiet. But, you know, and I said to the judge, I said, look, her boyfriend was there both times. He's twice the size of me. Do you think I've stood on the doorstep and bullied her? But all I asked her for to start with was £5 a week. Just pay £5 a week. I mean, that's actually a decent tip, isn't it? If you get that kind of admittance
Paul.
of debt.
It's principle.
It's also handy if you come to a victim later on or whatever.
But only if you enforce it will it become a CCJ. That's the biggest problem.
Well, she rang me afterwards and said, I thought, hold on, it's all happened today. I thought it was on Thursday. And I was like, well, you know what you need, don't you? And she's like, what? I said, well, a diary. And she's like, who the F do you think you are? I was like, you know, we've been through this process. Right, how much do you want a week then? I was like, no, it's past that now. I've got a court order on you, which means that basically if you don't pay me, they'll come and take your sofa. So, like, you've let it get to this. And where's your mum been in all this? You know, where like, she's your guarantor. And she wouldn't answer a phone. All of that kind of stuff. Next thing, I said, look, if your mother rings me, I'll let you pay over 2 months. And then the mother rang. I said, where have you been in all this? Your daughter's in the shit with me. She's getting taken to court and all that kind of stuff. You're the guarantor. Like, so you're effectively involved with this. Like, where have you been? You know, where's your sense of responsibility? And anyway, she's like, right, give me your bank details. Next thing, you know, whatever it was, however many grand back in my bank account. And I thought, you could have done that. But they just like to seem to, it's like a control thing, I think. It's like a control freak thing sometimes with them where they think, here's this guy with all this money, actually no, you know, who's risked everything. But, you know, yeah, you might drive around in a nice car, you might live in a nice house, but I work 16-hour days and have done for like 7 days a week for a lot of years on the tools. Black as a crow, and, you know, coming home at night, 10 o'clock at night, black as a crow after, you know, ripping out chimney breasts and stuff like that. You know, for years and years and years building my portfolio. Yeah. Giving, you know, renting people little palaces, and then you get them back sometimes 5 years later. No, I mean, I've really tightened up on my criteria, you know, going to see people's properties before they take one of my properties. Good tip. You know, great stuff. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask you this. So my staff won't ask this question, but I always used to say to people, have you ever suffered a mental health difficulty? Have you ever had an addiction? Or is there anything you want to tell me about regarding whatever? But apparently by law, you're not allowed to ask that.
You can't do that now. You want me to do that.
Yeah, so, but the thing is, I previously thought, well, it's a conversation between me and them. And yeah, I always said to them, look, it's not going to affect your tenancy, but just tell me, is there anything I need to know? But we're just, our hands are tied a lot of the time with what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, look, what we find as landlords, and it comes with time, and we've been in this game a long time, you get a thing called gut feeling. That comes with experience. Yes. We've rented, we've let our heart rule ahead, and we've made mistakes and whatever. You know, what's going to happen now, the game of renting has massively changed. Whether you're in the northeast, whether you're in London, wherever, we have a massive rental stock crisis. On average, you have 25 applicants looking for one property. Yeah. You know, we've got a new Labour government coming in, and they want to build new towns, and they want to build 1.5 million properties. And I think that's brilliant, you know. Obviously, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Will it happen? Where's the financing? Well, you know, Angela Rayner says she wants 40% of those to be affordable social housing. I can't. You won't be able to get up to that quota because, of course, you've got to get the developers to buy in. A lot of them land bank and all that type of stuff. But coming back to the referencing, you know, and of course we're going to talk about. I'm sure we'll talk about banning Section 21, all that stuff. It's going to have an effect because landlords are going to be much more stringent. The criteria. I've got one of my mates. He's one of the biggest landlords in Brighton. I grew up with him when I was 12 years old. He's got 1,000 tenants. Big player down there. One of my good mates, Mafia, and he now says every reference I have to have a guarantor. It's part of the criteria, you know. And of course, what's happening as landlords, you know, yes, it's uncertain, but actually, it's still a really good industry to be in because now you're getting a pick of the best tenants compared to maybe 10 years ago. How do you qualify them? Now, a good tip you, Paul, said if you've got the time, you know, or if you've got a good managing agent, that's another story, is that you go to their properties. How do they look at their properties? What happens is that, you know, if you talk about the Renters Reform Bill that's going to come in, Renters Reform Mark 2, you know, you can't discriminate against new potential tenants. So if they've got children, are they on benefits? You can't be asking that, which is fair enough in this day and age. But what happens is if you have applicants coming in, and you've got 25 applicants, you pick the best 3, okay, there's going to be 22 that aren't going to make the grade for whatever reason. You can make that informed decision. You're the landlord. When you see that referencing report, and that's why you've got to have a really good referencing company that does it, you know. And of course, what's the criteria? You know, what is a big problem, wherever it is in the country now, we have a massive problem on affordability for tenants. It's a massive problem. You know, on average, you've got a tenant paying 30 to 35% of their wages towards rent. It's becoming unsustainable, and Labour will get a grip of that. However that looks, whether the devolution of powers and...
So it didn't work well in Scotland, did it? So.
It didn't work, and rents went up. They talk about rent caps and stuff. It's not... The word rent cap scares the life out of landlords. I said this on a podcast we did last week, actually, for Hamilton Fraser, for the Property Cast one. It could be deemed as rent reviews, but if you're a landlord and said that, you know, you can have a rent rise once a year, and it's, you know, it goes in with the line of inflation, landlords would accept it. But we know historically landlords didn't put rents up anyway. They were forced to when obviously the rates went up, which killed landlords. But I think landlords will be much more stringent on referencing, knowing that it's going to be more troublesome maybe getting tenants out when they're relying on Section 8 and the courts, which is the nightmare as well. But having a guarantor, you know, you're looking at companies like Rent Guarantor, really good rent guarantee company that give guarantors and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think also some landlords that are desperate, they make rash decisions as well. They're worried about void periods. Well, actually, you could leave it empty for a few days just to get the right tenant.
It's not doing tenants any favours, I don't think, with Section 21, because you could always agreed with the tenant that you're going to give them a Section 21. They can then take that to the council. And of course, with a Section 8, the council are looking at them saying, when you're getting kicked out on these grounds, therefore we're not going to take you in our council houses. So there's going to be a lot more homelessness. And don't you find with shelter and people like that, there's sort of, you get the feeling that they're laughing down the sleeves at landlords.
Well, they haven't picked up that point, Paul. Let me. You made a very good point. So I've been saying it for years and years and years and years, right? Councils are still telling tenants to stay put so they can be rehoused with the council. You've got 1.3 million people on a council waiting list. Yeah, it's horrendous. It takes on average 25 years to get a council property, right? You've got 2 hopes, Bob Hope and no hope, let's face it, right? The reality is this, and I said this to the government that came to my office. So there was I was on loads of different working groups, where there was a working group, a consultation on housing courts, which they kicked into long grass. They didn't want to do that because you need to invest in the courts. I brought the government, the civil servants into my office, get them to sit next to my Landlord Action staff in 2019, right, before the Renters Reform Bill was properly announced. And I said, do you know what the unintended consequence of getting rid of Section 21 is? And we produced a report called Beyond Section 21. I had 70 pages in with the Lettings Industry Council for the London School of Economics. And we said that there's lots of tenants being rehoused by the council on Section 21 court orders that are in rent arrears. We did a survey on landlords own that 45% of landlords at that time were going down the Section 21 route because they didn't want a Section 8 route and were writing off the rent arrears. You were doing a tenant a favour. All of a sudden, when Section 21 goes, which most probably be in about a year's time, give or take, what will happen is landlords will have to go down the Section 8 route, yeah? And they'll be forced to Section 8. And then there'll be rent arrears court order, which means if you go to the council, exactly what you said, the council's going to say, you owe me £5,000 rent arrears, sorry, we can't rehouse you, you've made yourself intentionally homeless.
Yeah.
So there's unintended consequences that happen with that. And I don't think the tenant organisations, i.e. Shelter and Generation Rent, have fully understood that. you know. But then the other flip side is, and I understand this, is tenants are getting a lot of anxiety when it comes to, you know, I've got my sister, you know, she said that she gets anxiety when she gets a text from her landlord because she's worried, is my landlord going to sell their property? Mm-hmm. And we've seen at Landlord Action the last year and a half, is that fair enough to say, Victoria? A massive increase of Section 21 instructions, more than Section 8, and most of that is because landlords are selling. And that happened because the interest rate in Section 24, people worried about EPCs, that's been kicked in the long grass. And of course the Renters Reform Bill and what does Labour look like, and is it going to be all this uncertainty, and being a landlord is more difficult, you know, now, and you've been a landlord for 30 years. It must be, is it the most difficult time being a landlord now than ever before?
100%.
Yeah.
The Section 24 has just absolutely killed it for me, where I'm just, you know, when it's like we're one tiny part of society, I feel like for the first time that, so they took away, taper relief on capital gains, have taken away furnishings allowance, all of that kind of stuff. And you kind of go, okay, right.
They chip away a little bit.
Yeah, but now it's like, actually, we're going to tax you on turnover. It's like,
turnover,
are you
not profit.
freaking for real? It's absolutely
because landlords have been an easy target.
I mean, one little thing that I feel that people might take some solace in is I thought if I transferred my, and this is where it's all about getting the right advice, I thought that if you transferred your property into a limited company, you'd get capital gains tax and stamp. But apparently if you buy it all as a oneer from a sole trader into a limited company, you can get away. You don't have to pay the capital gains tax. It's just the stamp. So I went from thinking it was going to cost me, 300 grand, 400 grand to do it to maybe 150. It's like, well, actually, I'll save that on the tax within 4 years. And I mean, it's like one of those things. It's like a tidal wave that it's coming, but you're messing around doing a lot of other projects and bits and bobs. And I wish I'd fixed it 3% a couple of years ago, and now I'm like, rent.
The problem you've got, Paul, is landlords. The reality, and I do name check, and I'll say it later on at your event and whatever. And I take black as black, white as white at me. Landlords have had it good for a long time.
Yes,
right, and they have short memories. They've had 0% interest for 12 years or whatever it may be. All right? Don't forget, I talked right at the beginning of this podcast. I did 13 or 14 repossession hearings at 17 years old at Brighton County Court when the interest rate was 14, 15%. You speak to newbie landlords of 5-10 years ago, they think you're talking they're thinking you're doing double Dutch. Yeah. Right? That's the reality. So interest rates eventually did have to come up, and if and buts, and I get all that stuff. But I say this saying all the time, and I keep saying it is, as landlords, we can't have steak every day of the week. Sometimes we've got to have egg and chips, right? And that's the reality, And it's and that's why as landlords, you've got to look at your business. It's a business. It's a profession. Do I have a business plan? Am I keeping to my 5-year plan? Do I have an exit strategy? My stock, which one of those properties is a dog? Because the problem in the area, I can't manage it properly, the tenant's not right, the licensing issue, whatever it may be, and the rates are coming out, whatever, you know what? I need to get a shot of that. Yeah. And that's where we need to do a lot more business with. And then, of course, and I'll talk about this later, is, the hardest thing in property, is managing that property. It's full management, it's self-management, it's hardest. And I say to landlords now, and you're getting a lot of landlords, older landlords that are doing reviews of their business, think, you know what, I might give it to an agent, or get the right agent, which is a feat in itself, or am I embracing property technology? Have I got a power team of really good maintenance guys? Have I got someone that I can really rely on? Have I got the right infrastructure around me to run my property business? And a lot of time they don't, and then landlords don't put a price on their time. That's where they go wrong. Yeah,
and do you know what? That's always been a bit of a bummer when you go to take someone go to evict someone out of a property or add the.
They're losing their home.
You can't. Yeah, no, but you can't add your time. When anyone's been communicative and respectful, even on a big debt, I'm like, listen, £5 a week.
Give them a chance.
I've when you get tenants saying, look, I'll give you an extra £100 a month. I say, look, I'd rather have £20 a month or £50 a month. I don't want you to give me, an extra 10, 15% of your wages. Just give me what you can afford, and let's do it over a long period of time. It's like I call it, bringing in a £10 trout on £3 line. You're going to pull too quick and too hard. It's just not going to happen. And I just prefer continuity.
But it comes down to that.
You talked about egg and chips.
Yeah.
I feel like with this Section 24 that I'm left with actually just the salt and vinegar, because even if I put the rents up a bit more, just to sort of offset those the mortgages a bit, you just get
How often do you put your rents up?
Just getting taxed on turnover. I hadn't put up until last year. I hadn't put my rents up for a decade.
Right.
And they have come up quite considerably. Like average 2-bedder in Darlow, 411 a month. 95 a week, 411 a month. 3-bedder maybe 475, 500.
Right.
Now we're looking at 3-bedders being sort of 700. Terraced houses, we're looking at 2-bedders on a fairly average street, 575.
Yeah.
And so that would have been great. I'm not just all about the money. I like the continuity. And,
of course. And you
cash
get a
flow.
good tenant, you
And
keep them.
no tenant turnarounds, yeah. But it's just, I had a tenant said to me the other week, actually, which was quite amusing. He said, at 50-odd-year-old, Paul, should you not have had this mortgage paid off by now? And I was like, well, do you know what? If I'd have just bought 10 houses and paid them all off, yeah, fine. But what I've done is I've refinanced and I've bought, I've got quite a lot of houses now. And so I'm giving lots more people like you a nice place to live. Yeah. So, and he said, yeah, but you go snowboarding, don't you? And I was like, well, yeah, I do once a year. But actually, my missus went to Turkey last year and she's currently in Portugal. She's taking the kids and whatever. I haven't got time to go. I cannot do that. I'm a bit of a workaholic anyway. But I said to him, well, but you get your rent paid for by the Freemasons. So what's the crack? And he said, well, partly. I was like, well, so if I'm putting your rent up by 50 quid, like my mortgage has gone up 200 quid. So, I'm just trying to share the love a little bit here. So
you're in a no-win situation. Look,
yes,
you're not going to get landlord love from a lot of tenants.
A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. I think that's massively true in landlording and renting properties. By the way, have you ever rented properties yourself? Have you got your own portfolio?
I've only got a couple of properties. Yeah. I only got a couple of properties. I should have bought more, but it's really weird. I've had opportunities and I could have, done it. It's all different buts or whatever, but I wouldn't have been where I am now because I could have done, when I started Landlord Action, I had an opportunity to do some stuff with my mate in Brighton and do a lot of stuff. And for me, I had this mindset that I couldn't do two things at once. I mean, I do a million things at once now, but to actually run my business, build a business and do what I'm doing, I could have been a bit more ruthless and bought other property, and I didn't, and that is a regret of mine. It's not, a regret. I really, it is what it is, and I might buy some property in the future and whatever, but I'm not that desperate, to be honest. The reality is, I can make more money doing other things. Yeah. I get 13% of my pension.
Yeah.
Are you financially secure now? Could you retire tomorrow if you wanted?
No, I don't think I could. I think even if I could, I wouldn't. That's the reality. I just love working. I do love working. I like to try and build a legacy. I do, like with most parents, I do what I do for my kids. I want them to have what I didn't have, really. My parents were loving and whatever, but I didn't come for money. Squandered money when I was younger, doing stupid things and all that type of stuff. But no, I want to work and I need to work. For me, it's a bit of a drug.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with working, and I like, I also like helping people, and I'm very passionate about landlord education, and it's just something that I've been working with landlords now for 35 years, albeit doing the tenant eviction, but obviously I've moved into a lot more broader things.
Just to ask on, obviously you mentioned there about wanting to work, your work ethic. Has that come from an early age? Because obviously with what you do, it's quite confrontational as well. I'm just wondering, what in your upbringing has kind of led you down this path, really? Because to have the bollocks to do what you do, I guess you've got to be tough.
I've always had a real work ethic because it didn't come from money. So I want to, I remember doing a car wash round. This is how old I am. So I'm 53. I did a car wash round where I used to charge £1 or £2 for inside and outside a car. And I'd do 10 cars a day, and that was when I was 14, 15. I remember once, I remember my dad telling me this story. It reminds me, I've got a really bad memory, right? And I worry about this when I get older. But anyway, my dad told me, so my dad used to have a shop in Fulham and he used to have a boutique and a hairdresser's. And do you remember the days where they used to have the transfer machine when you put the transfers on the T-shirts, sweatshirts? And he had about 15, 20 sweatshirts. And he goes, if you sell them, we go halves. So I was, obviously, I'm not very tall, as you know. I had a black sack and I went door to door knocking. This is when I lived in East Grinstead.
Did you wear a black and white stripy shirt?
I didn't. I can't remember the shirt, to be honest. I can't remember what it was. And actually, just reminded me of another story, actually. And I sold them all in a day. I came back late, and my dad just couldn't understand. I've always loved sales. I've always loved outreaching, and it's never been about the money. It's about doing deals and stuff like that. It's funny actually because I remember I did a knockdown. Do you remember knockdown ginger? We used to knock on the door and run away. It just remembered me. I remember I knocked on this guy's door and he started running after me. And he was a marathon runner, and I jumped over my wall and he grabbed my shoe and he ended up knocking on the door. And my dad told me about it. So yeah, it's quite funny. But I've always had a real strong inner belief and desire to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Did you get
always
bullied?
have?
Did you get bullied at all at school?
No, not really. No, not at all. I used to have quite a laugh at school. I really had low, really bad attention. I just used to just mess about in school. Just concentration. I was really bad with exams. Couldn't remember stuff. Really good at coursework stuff, but just wanted to work. Left school, no qualifications. And I thought to myself, if I'd have gone into a estate agency, I would have done. It's all if and buts, And I think the move is, I moved back to London when I was 18. I bought my first property when I was 22, and I just traded up and ended up buying a family home and all that type of stuff. Then I bought something. I got a place in Spain, and then I got another buy to let and stuff. But I haven't. I was always quite sporty, but yeah, I had quite a good, and I've got mates everywhere. Because I moved around a bit, I've got literally mates and from all different backgrounds, from all over the place from where I lived, and loads of my mates in London.
There's some big parallels with your journey and my journey, mate. Sorry, you don't like the word journey, do you, Anthony?
Oh, well, you've got to use it though. There's no other word sometimes,
exactly.
is there?
I've actually written a post defending the word journey, by the way. But yeah, attention at school. I was great at coursework. I was terrible at exams.
Yeah.
Not great memory. All of that kind of stuff, and we are a little bit about life of a fruitcake. Fruitcake as in neurodivergent.
Yeah.
Also, I think that you maybe have a sense of defending people that are kind of, worth defending against. Yeah. So you would defend a tenant against a bad landlord.
Yeah.
You would defend
I've always had that. Just generally
a good landlord against a bad tenant.
Yeah.
And one episode in particular that really sort of wrenched my heart was there was this lovely fella. I think he was from Watford. He was a builder.
Yeah.
And he had to evict that woman out of that house.
She was a wrong one.
She just,
and her boyfriend.
The way she spoke to that man.
That was South Oxley.
I have a certain amount of patience, but as a landlord over the years...
He was lovely, that landlord.
He's a lovely fella. And sometimes I've been to a door and a tenant's paid the rent for months and months and months, and single mum with kids, and then this mush comes to the door and I'm saying, I've not been paid this month, and he's like, you're not getting paid this month, mate. And I'm thinking, right, you've just turned up and all of a sudden I'm not getting paid, so is this something to do with you?
It's like an entitlement.
I can't it's that
it's all right for you. It's that
entitlement.
It's all right for you. You've
really,
owned the property.
Really grips my shit.
Yeah, no.
I've ended up, sometimes I'm not proud of it, but I've ended up rolling around in back alleys and backyards with people that have that attitude. Yeah. And therefore, that's why I massively respect your ability. I mean, you're on camera anyway, aren't you? But
I'm on camera,
and it's your job, so you've got.
But I don't do it day in, day out. Let's be clear. I ran the business. I've done it in a former life as a bailiff. Like I said, I've done some. As a process server and as a bailiff, you do real frontline stuff. I can talk about a story. I've got loads of stories. I tell about a story which always gets a laugh, and I normally talk about a thing where I hid inside an industrial wheelie bin once to serve a divorce petition on someone on a London estate for 20 minutes. To
like a Jack in the Box.
Jack in the Box, yeah. 2 other process servers failed to. I got chased by armed guards in the streets of Cairo, where I had to serve a writ for $9 million on a CEO. I did some some repossessed an Arabian horse in Newmarket and a horse box, and the trainer brought out a gun because he was owed £25,000 in fee. I've done some madman stories, and that was all before Landlord Action. So when I did Landlord Action and going on the door, that was a piece of cake, because you don't forget, who's behind the door. When you do the squatter stuff, you don't know who you're dealing with, and that can get a bit naughty, And I did that a couple of times. I used to have to get, go into crack dens and
needles and stuff like that.
Needles and brothels and all that mad stuff.
I think if you show no fear, see, I've sometimes thanked the world of ecstasy and stuff like that when I've been in to break a 20-person party up in a room in an HMO, and I walk in and say, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're like, who's this geezer in his crazy hat? And I'm like, hello, I'm the landlord, and it's time to go. And a lot of the time they're like, oh, come have a drink, mate, and have a line of this. And I'm like, do you know, 15 years ago I might have, but, you know, I need to get back to bed, so off you pop. And generally people are all right with it.
It's how you speak to people. It's really important. How you speak to them and show, you know, like I said, your respect's really important. How you speak to people, you know, you got to realise, I don't know what's been going on. We come in at the end, we're the emergency plumbers at Landlord Action. Last year we did over 3,500 instructions. I've got a team of 23 staff. We're regulated, you've got solicitors, whatever, and we're relying on a court service, which is broken at the moment, right, as you know, you alluded to. When we do the TV stuff, because obviously it becomes a number, when you're doing the TV stuff and you're knowing about it and you're getting profile, you get to know the landlord, know a bit of the tenant, sometimes they come to a lot of the time, like you said, you know, a good tenant doesn't turn into a bad tenant overnight. And what defines a bad tenant? A bad tenant can be someone that doesn't communicate, buries their head in the sand, which is the majority of tenants. Someone that's lost their job or their relationship is broken down, you know, and they've fallen hard times, and I believe always give someone a chance, you know, and if they're truthful with you, they will say, and we can try and work it out, and you can mediate and do work. And then, of course, you get the people that really will take the piss. So you get serial bad tenants, you get subletting gangs. You know, I've been involved in some quite naughty subletting gangs as well. I got threatened by one once as well. Then there's dodgy letting agents that steal rents. So whenever I did a series, it was serial bad tenants, dodgy letting agents I'd exposed, dodgy rent-to-rent characters, right? Airbnb scams. So I do it all, you know, and we do it all when there be stories. And because, of course, not all landlords want to go on TV, but you knew what was behind the door. And normally, you know, if they do kick off, they normally go for the cameraman first rather than me. But yeah, generally, I did enjoy doing it, but that was like, it was another period in my life, and I still get people that come up, and you know, I've had a few people that you know have given me a bit of abuse on Twitter or a couple of times in the street, but generally everyone's really nice and they're respectful because you know at the end of the day, someone's losing their home, Paul.
Yeah.
And it's not nice. And you think about now, if you lose your home or you've been told to leave, you know, and of course the rents have shot up. Where's that and you didn't put the rents up for 10 years and you weren't the property, you know. And of course, if someone is taking, and a lot of landlords feel like, you know, a tenant is taking advantage of me, you know, and you give a tenant a chance to, and that's why, you know, you think, well, have you got 6 years rent arrears or 1 year's rent arrears?
It's just the time it takes as well.
It's time, but it's the emotion. It's the emotion. It's like you get rid of a tenant, you want to wipe your hands, you want to relet, all right, you can offset against your rent arrears. You know, you might have a bad tenant once in a blue moon, but obviously if you keep getting bad tenants, there's something fundamentally wrong in your business. What you're doing wrong, how you're referencing, and all that stuff. But, you know, I believe give someone a chance. But I don't know what's been going on in their life. So when I'm turning up, or when a bailiff turns up, you know, and, you know, that being a bailiff, you know, you have certified bailiffs, which is what I did in the commercial stuff. You have the county court bailiffs and the high court sheriffs. But the county court bailiffs, they're not paid a lot of money. They're going around trying to collect debts, which they never collect. They're not on commission. They're not on, you know, they're not incentivised. People haven't got any money. And then, of course, when you are trying to collect money against a tenant or an ex-tenant, and we do tenant tracing and debt recovery at Landlord Action, a lot of them don't have any assets. That's why they're renting, you know. Do they have a job? If they've got a job, and social media does give you an indicator now, Paul. So if they've got a job, you can get an attachment earnings. I say to landlords, you know, if you've got a tenant that's really taken advantage and the debt's there, enforce the judgment. It lasts for 6 years, and a lot of tenants do aspire to own their own property. But if you enforce the judgment, it becomes a county court judgment. If you don't enforce that possession order at court, then they're just going to move on to someone else, and no one's going to know. Because trying to get a previous landlord's reference, I could come to you, and I've been a bad tenant, right? But you give me a good reference because you want to get rid of me and pass it on to Paul. It's dog eats dog. Yeah, you know.
We had to evict it, and you know, and it shouldn't have done very few of them over the years. To be fair, it's a massive chew on. You've got to get the paperwork absolutely.
It's harder now than ever
Jump
before.
through a hoop,
really
land
hard.
on a sixpence.
Yeah,
and you know, we got to court, and the girl turned up. She owed me, I know, about $5,000 by this point. She'd been an absolute nightmare with I'm going to pay then and lies, and me knocking on the door, all you know, talking to her boyfriend, and they were earning money. And if they'd have just paid the rent plus an extra £5 off the arrears or something like that, would have been fine over a period of time. But it was just intermittent. When you've got that intermittency, it's just like, do you know
draining.
what? Sorry, I've let it go too far now because I've tried and tried.
But
she turned up with this most fantastic hairdo and a lovely tan and all of that kind of stuff. And the lass I was with at the time, Gemma in the course, she turned around and said, "Don't say anything because I know you want to say something. I want to say, how much was your fucking hairdo?"
I know. I think,
and we got in there. The judge was the most horrible man. He was just absolutely disdainful towards everyone, by the way. And I just thought, wow, that was no way of going on. It was a funny old experience. Quite like adrenaline. I quite liked it in a way.
I know. But the thing is, it's time consuming and it's emotionally draining. You know, we call ourselves at Landlord Action, and Victoria's with me. She takes the calls. We're like landlord Samaritans, right? Landlords will call up, and it's draining, and you need to evict a tenant. You just want to shut. And then, of course, what's going on in that landlord's life? You know, so 85% of landlords out there have 1 to 3 properties. There are a lot of those landlords that are getting out of the market. They need to sell their property because they need vacant possession. They need to sell and whatever. But we have a housing shortage. So let's be clear about that, which is a massive problem. But it's very, very time consuming. It's very emotional. Can be a landlord. It's not easy. And I try and explain this for whatever radio program going on, LBC or GB, whatever it means, about the understanding of it, on how it is. But coming back to being a professional landlord, landlord, I can ask a question at your event tonight, or I asked a question last week at the Landlord Investment Show last Wednesday. I did 3 talks that day, busy as hell. Did a talk. How many of you tell people that you are a landlord? Put your hand up. 1 hand went up out of 120 people.
Really?
Landlords are ashamed of saying that they're landlords. But the word landlord, and I say this all the time, is dated.
Yeah.
I own the land and I'm your lord. Right? Tenant. Well, the tenant's your customer, because without tenants we wouldn't be here. Right? And we're housing providers. So that has to change as well, and the language and the rhetoric all has to change, because at the moment, landlord, tenant, generation rent, shelter, gunning for landlords, hate landlords. It doesn't help. It doesn't help when it comes to policy making. It doesn't help with joined up thinking. It doesn't help that, we've had 15 housing ministers in 13 years. All of that, everything, something's got to change.
There's a generational sort of disdain between a lot. I mean, I say like 99% of my tenants, I think, would tell you that I'm a good landlord and they want to stay with me. And I've had some of them for 20 years and stuff like that. And 1% will tell you that I'm horrible.
Yeah.
And
you take that stat all day long.
It's the people that, put the head below the sand when shit's happening. It just becomes so frustrating.
But you get the brunt of it.
What they don't realise is the other stuff as you're trying to develop property. And I did put like 45 single lets together before. I thought, why haven't I got up in? I built some industrial units in 2008, and that felt like a brilliant release away from just being on the tools time and time again, putting properties together and this, that, and the other. But nowadays, I'm wanting to get up into some bigger, better stuff. But actually, I've drawn a bit of a line in the sand where I now cannot bear to be told by the local authority or by Natural England that I've got to pay £100,000 of nutrient neutrality credits to get a development off the ground. It's like, are you having a laugh? Why don't you just put a pound on 100,000 people's water bill because they won't notice? But it's like, no, you've got to pay that. Why is Gateshead Council took 26 weeks over a 6-week pre-app process? Like, and they get a shitty on with me on the Zoom when I say to them, have you ever thought of working back till 6? And they're like, sorry, I'm going to put you off the Zoom. And it's like, I've mentioned this on other poddies as well. It's that innate frustration and just banging your head off a wall with local authorities over stuff to do with planning. You're putting in prior notifications and they're knocking you back on parking. It's like, you can't knock me back on parking. And now even with a flat development in the northeast where it barely stacks anyway after materials have doubled, they're saying, oh yeah, you're going to need 4 nutrient credits with that building. So that's going to be 12 grand. And you're like, just another 12 grand. I know,
and I think on that point, and what I am infused with Labour, and I hope, and they've only been in office 3 days, 4 days, whatever it is really, and a high priority is going to be the planning law reform.
Yeah,
I really would hope they do a massive deep dive. They're going to put quotas to local councils, which is really important, much more accountability, and it needs to be done. It really needs to be done because We've got a massive shortage in planning inspector. I mean, it's just from top to bottom. It is a massive overhaul, and I hope this government do it and they really make some strides in the next 5 years. And I think all landlords would welcome that.
I think. Do you reckon when rates start to drop, I'm thinking that's going to be the kind of the flag for a lot of people to start jumping in and doing a bit more property again?
Yeah, I think. Look, as a landlord now, I think what you're doing. Look, you're a veteran. You've been doing it 30 years. You've seen it, done it. I mean, the single. Look, if you're moving into the business, the single buy to let stuff as a beginner, it makes sense for one or two and whatever. And then look at diversing, and people look at the short stay. And I think social housing has great opportunities in guaranteed rents. I think that there's a I think what we're paying on temporary accommodation, people in hotels. I mean, I think there's some great opportunities. I think that landlords really need to take stock of what they're. I think the game's changed now. You've really got to diversify.
So if my fairy, I often ask people if when I'm helping them out one-to-ones or a bit of mentoring, this, that, and the other, I'll say, like, if your fairy godmother could come down and grant you 3 wishes in your working life, what would it be? And I think mine would be just to get one good old chunky financial, fairly philanthropically entrepreneurial thinking investor on board. Just to take just to allow me to, firstly, bring all of my properties into a limited company and say, I mean, my tax bill at the moment, my tax bill next year is going to be like 70 grand. And yet the bottom 14 houses in my portfolio, I'm probably making £1,000 on. Whereas it's ridiculous. Some of them, I've got quite a few HMOs and stuff like that. I'm making more money on them. And that's actually kept the job afloat, to be fair. Why would it be that I would have bought a load of single-lets over a period of time? And yes, I've done some refinancing over the years to buy more property. I've never done that refinancing and bought myself a whatever. Yeah. It's like it's gone into more property. So it's like, got 110 grand property, I'll say 100 grand property, you bought it for 28, maybe 20 years ago, it's got a 60 grand mortgage on it. I can't really sell it to put 40 grand in the bank, you're paying 20 odd grand in tax. Okay, that's kind of all right. That's the way that capital gain works. When you refinance it, you take that money out tax-free, and you go and spend it on another deposit. The difficult bit is the income. The Section 24 tax is like, we're just going to take all of that.
But have you done a full business review?
Yes, I'm on with that at the moment.
Right.
So I'm going to see my accountant on Monday morning. We're going to work out exactly which properties have to be sold off. And, going back to the nutrient neutrality credits thing, like, because nutrient levels are dodgy in the rivers, it's like, right, we're going to charge developers that. But I'm like, so I was at a Natural England meeting with Darlington LPA, local planning authority, and I stood up, and there's, I don't know, 70, 80 people in the room, I think, and I said to the guy, listen, you want me to pay you 100? It was actually in a part hotel development, but even if I took it into C3 Resi, it would be, have to buy these credits. So I said to him, and that's when I said, like, can you not just put £1 on 100,000 people's bills instead of charging me 100 grand that I wasn't expecting? If I'd have gone in for planning, you went in for planning in the same town a few months before, got his planning, I went in, afterwards, and then all of a sudden it's like, you've got to pay for these credits. But then they took 2 years to work out how they were going to deal these credits out, instead of allowing me to get on with the development, charging me at the end. And it's like, there's no common sense in it all. But I'm like, you want me to... Sorry, mate, I said, you want me to... So I'm now going to have to sell maybe parts of my portfolio, putting people out of properties to finance your credit scheme that you've taken 2 years to get to before you, instead of just giving me it as a condition of planning. All you had to do is give me it as a condition of planning and say, pay us later, Paul, we're fine. You're going to have 100 grand to pay before you rent the thing out. And I could have delivered a 20-bed apartment. Exactly. So why is it that politicians just pedal backwards against like? Why is it that they can't see sense?
It's the problem is with local authority, and I know they're going to. And I read today actually they're looking at housing czar, right, which would make sense, because you think about, you've had housing ministers, they're there for 1 year, 2, and they just move on. There's no continuity. You need experts, people that are seasoned veteran pros, and there should be an all cross party group there that's working in housing across the board, and just as that department within a department. They've even changed the name, obviously, of Levelling Up now. They've pulled that away. The problem you've got is councils are so siloed, and we're in the world of NIMBYs, not in my backyard, and there's been a lot of that happening. I like I said to you, I think the plans of building new towns, the use of using greenbelt, right, and much more brownfield, that's going to happen. You'll see that there'll be a big reform on release.
What was the new one? The grey one. What was that one? The grey
I heard
belt.
that.
Grey belt?
Yeah, grey belt. But I think, also, if you think of in London, there's so much property with, Transport for London now, and so much property within. But you are going to have devolution of powers, which are going to go to mayors. And how do they use that? What do they use that? I think we've needed a drastic change. And, if you look at what's happened, and we're going to talk about politics now, if you look what's happened in the last 14 years with the Conservative government, and people think they're pro-landlord and whatever, and obviously it hasn't worked out that way. But housing is a massive issue. And you mentioned something before with regard to a disdain of what tenants feel like with landlords. That's happening now with much more younger tenants. You're looking at your tenants from 18 to most probably 35 in that barrier now, and they're fed up. They're fed up with having bad landlords. Not bad landlords, maybe naive landlords, because the thing is, a tenant is driven by the property, not by the landlord. And then, of course, if a landlord, they want to go into property, and what do you want your tenant to feel like that property? Feel like it's their home. And then they can put their kids in schooling, and the average term of a tenancy is like something like 22 months. So and we are going to have periodic tenancies when Section 21 comes in, and I actually think, and I've said this all along, incentivise landlords to have tenants in properties longer, right, on a sliding scale. So you have a tenant from 0 to 3 years, or 3 to 5, or 5 to. Have that, so there's continuity. You look at what's happening in Europe and Germany, whatever, and Sweden. They have tenancies for much longer. We're not talking about going down the rent protected tenancies, the Rent Act days and stuff like that. But you need to incentivise landlords. And look, the private rental sector over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 years has changed so much dramatically, 19, 20%. And a lot of it hasn't been fit for purpose. You've got landlords now that have had to be social workers, right? And are dealing with a lot of LHA tenants because of social housing, and they haven't been capable of being able to deal with that, And then, of course, you're getting councils that are telling tenants to stay put. And then, of course, what happens then? Now, that landlord has gone through the stage of having to evict that tenant, not getting his rent, council's going against him saying, don't pay that. And then, of course, you've even got the issue with universal credit, not having direct payment. That's a complete shambles. And then why would a landlord want to rent to a tenant that's on benefits ever again? They wouldn't.
It's part of that backward thinking.
It's backward thinking.
Why would
encourage it? Encourage it. Work with landlords.
I had loads of tenants, Paul, just going, I really don't want this to happen. So that not only have they not listened to landlords, they've also not listened to the tenants that don't want to be interested.
They don't. They're kicking the can down the road because they're looking at.
We're empowering tenants to pay their own rent. Well, actually, a lot of them don't want to be empowered.
I'll tell you that story, right? I'll tell you the story. I was one of the first to break a story. It was in 2008. It was Gordon Brown that brought that law in. So Section 24 was most probably the worst law that came in. The second worst law was having direct payments of universal credit. It was LHA in those days, directly to tenants, empower them. And you could only get direct payment if there was vulnerability, drink, mental health and all that type of stuff, to have direct payment, right? And of course, the landlord's worrying they're not going to get their direct payment. Now the game's changed because, of course, rents have shot up. And unfortunately, those tenants that are fighting in that 25 pool of tenants, they're going to be at the bottom of the list. They're not going to be able to make it. And then, of course, we've got an ever-increasing population, and, of course, obviously there's immigration and people in infrastructure. So we are in really challenging times, as well as throwing into the mix of landlord feeling demoralised, lack of confidence. Yeah. And, of course, landlords don't want... And I said to landlords, if you're expecting to get medals in the medal shop down the road, you ain't going to get none.
No.
There's no violin. No one cares about you. And, of course, it all comes down to the fact that as a landlord, a landlord... And look, a worse profession than a landlord is an estate agent, believe it or not, in the bottom 5.
I've just become one of those this last week.
Right, so
proper hated
Verve Estates, actually, we're now listing as #1 estate.
Okay, so but look, there's the perception.
Best of a bad bunch.
Yeah, sorry, it's the perception. Landlord is not a great profession to be in. I mean, thus, one person put their hand up with the Landlord Investment Show when I asked them a question. You've got, you're down there with traffic wardens, bailiffs, bankers. All those. I mean, we have to change that perception of landlords. But but good landlord stories don't sell newspapers. Bad land. I mean, look, I was on a program called Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords, fair enough. But you're not going to have people celebrating the fact that their landlords are great landlords. It's not, I remember during COVID, strange times, we run Landlord Zone. So I got us to do a section Landlord Hero and Landlord Zone. Hearing amazing stories, landlords giving rent-free periods, going shopping, amazing stories. And I was getting criticised on Twitter when I was publishing them.
Can't do right for doing wrong.
You
That's
can't
win. I might have sounded
win.
like I've been a bit of a tenant basher in this podcast, and that's not the way that I am. I'm really respectful.
Most tenants are great. Honestly, they're really great.
A lot of my tenants, they keep the house like you could eat your dinner off the floor and all of that kind of stuff. And they
really care.
They're great people, and I've got some great friends that have been tenants over the years and stuff like that. And I always. I've got all the time for them. But it's those people, it's when they kind of have this kind of wall up straight away whenever it comes to, because I think it's fear-based. A lot of people, when they start getting behind the fear about getting back, and then they start to manifest that in ways of kind of kicking you back and not answering the phone and ostrich syndrome and all of that kind of stuff. But again, maybe it comes back to schools in a way as well. I went back to my school to do a chat a while ago to talk about entrepreneurialism, this, that, and the other. And I was the same. I said, how many of you guys, want to be an entrepreneur or a business person? And out of 250 kids and young adults in the room, literally 3% of hands went.
Yeah, it's a real shame. Isn't it?
I've said that probably on every body that I've done, and that kind of upset me inside in a little way, because it's. I just don't think there's that awareness towards because I think landlording is a bit. I think I call property the country's most favourite sideline, but there's also a reason why there is. Maybe you said 80% have 1 to 3 properties. I'd heard a statistic of 90% have 1 and 2 properties, probably the same one. And I think it's because people either they've moved out, they moved in with the missus, they've rented their house out, whatever. But I think a lot of it is they do a couple and go, shit, that was really hard. The refurb was a nightmare. Tradies are a nightmare. It's cost me more money than I thought.
And then
I've now run out of money, and now I'm getting my pants pulled down by the taxman.
And the finance has gone up as well.
That wasn't that great. Yeah. So, but that's only going to exacerbate the housing crisis. So, no taper relief, no housing, no furnishings allowance, clause 24. If you why should it be right that? If you've bought all of your properties in a limited company, you're getting 20% tax. I think my effective tax rate at the moment is over 60%, like more. But on it's just absolutely ridiculous. Why would I want to even carry on with that? The only thing I'm hanging on for now, and my accountant's like, sell half of it, Paul, and chill. And I'm like, well, I built that over 30 years, and now that I haven't bought anything for a couple of years, and I'd probably like to, bring all of them into repayment mortgages when I bring them across. Everything I bought since 2007, I bought in a limited company. But I'm looking at it thinking there's a chunk of property there that I'm not making anything on, but at least I'll make something on the capital appreciation. Yes. And I do feel Darlington is going to come up over the next few years. I think it's a bit of a hotspot area, to be fair, because we've had the HMRC moving here, we've had Department for Foreign Trade, and there's about 4,000 people rocking up over the next few years. I've heard. So I'm kind of like, and it's like at the start of, it's like that battle in Braveheart where it's like, point, hold, and it's like...
on that point, look, you've got options, right? I say to landlords, you've got a choice. If you don't like it, you can get out. That's the reality, yeah? If you don't need to sell, don't sell. If you don't need to fully manage, don't fully manage. Do the stuff you enjoy. You've earned the right, Paul, to do what you want to do. Right? At the end of the day, people get into property for financial freedom, to make decisions, to pass on, to get a million one different reasons why people are landlords, right? Be hands on. But you can do the stuff, buying a property, finding a deal, sourcing it, maybe, refurbing. That might be the sexy stuff to you. Yeah. Doing a deal, you've diverted, you're doing other things. Well, it used to be, but what I'm saying to you is you're sounding downtrodden.
Yes.
You're a downtrodden landlord, right? Now, general public won't feel sorry for you. They won't care about you, right? Other landlords might take note. So what do you do? So, the biggest killer and the biggest worry for landlords is tax. And then obviously, and CGT and all that type of stuff and financing, they're the biggest worries and trying to source a deal and all that. But you have to diversify your portfolio. What you've got to do is you've got to change your habits. You've actually got to think, right, do I still want to go around knocking on doors and speaking to my tenants or doing the calls or whatever? I need to delegate. It's a business.
I was happy paying 40% tax, and then George Osborne got in and went, we're going to bring this thing in. Now, you could say, well, you should have refinanced years ago. But when rates were, that was a commercial decision. When rates were 0.1%, 1%, whatever, you're like, well, I'm not going to, it doesn't matter how much.
It's all if and buts.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish I'd done things differently, but people might think I'm chuckied up to the eyeballs. I'm not. I mean, a friend of mine just handed 13 sets of keys back to the bank and went, do you know what? I'm having none of this anymore, because he'd let his properties get run down. So there was a fortune to spend on them to be able to sell them. And,
well, that's down to him, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And
you've got to take responsibility.
I am not that giver-upper. So what I'm doing is I'm just looking at it thinking, I have not refinanced any of my portfolio for 12, 13 years. It's not like I've chucking them up as soon as I can every time. I've tried to get let my LTVs reduce, but I've not refinanced anything.
Paul, your land on a business decision. You're doing a business review at the moment. Or whatever your business interest, that's working. There's a really good website called Landlord, Lendlord, Landlord, that actually, it's a subscription, brilliant bit of tech. I mean, landlords in this day and age, and I'm the most untechy person going, you really need to embrace prop tech and platforms out. There's some really good stuff. You stick your portfolio in there, it will tell you how you perform, and it looks at the algorithms, it looks at obviously the percentages, what you need to do and how you need to do and stuff like that. And I think landlords need that help. They need the help of different experts in different fields, a power team. Have you got a power team? Are we looking outside? Are we looking at things that we don't normally do and how we need to do them? Look, you must have a 3, 5, 10-year plan.
Well, I've started off Verve Property Management last year. I've got Verve Estates, which is our sales company that we just started this week. And I tell you what, I've loved getting out there selling properties. I've got Neon Source, which is by Verve, to start to source properties where I can earn some good fees. And the thing is that the difference between myself and a lot of property sources that have come up from down south and set themselves up with Darlington. Now, there's some good lads and lasses doing it, but there are a lot of them that, well, I won't say they don't know what they're doing quite so much with the refurbs, but I can go around the house and tell you every single mortal thing that house needs from start to finish, and probably give you a really good idea of price. And I think that's now my niche.
Well, it is, but you enjoy doing that, Paul. But I mean, the reality is this, Paul. You've got to do the things that you want to do, the sexy stuff. You've done the shitty stuff, right? You built a portfolio up. You've started an agency. You're doing sourcing, whatever. That's going to take one thing only. That's time.
Yeah.
You need to pull time out of there to be able to do that. One thing I realised, and I've done this, and I've made loads. I set a business up in Spain, which I did. Think back. I did a rent guarantee business in Spain. I needed big kahunas to do that. Did that for a company called Paragon Advance España while I was running Landlord Action. I managed to exit that, but it was the biggest nightmare ever.
How was it?
And I got out and whatever. But what I'm saying to you is, you can be a busy fool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where you've really got. And I think as time goes on, I do this, and I get people contacting me to do this, and I do mentor. I get people that want to do one-to-one stuff, and I don't mind doing it because I quite enjoy it. And I try and do the stuff that I enjoy doing. It's like with Nightmare Tenants. I did it. I could have carried on. It wouldn't. But I could have done another TV, and I might do some TV in the future, whatever. But I'll do other TV. I didn't want to do it anymore. Do
you think it's worth starting an action group and getting 1,000 landlords to go and camp out in cardboard boxes down the bottom of Downing Street or outside Parliament?
Well, I don't have time to do that, because if I had £1 for every time people want to do that, I don't mean need to do that. I think there's organisations out there. I think the one thing you've got to realise, and landlords love to moan. They love a moan up, right? And I do try and be balanced, and I tell it how it is, because I really know what's going on, and I deal with politicians, I deal with tenants. I've got landlords, tenants, landlords, letting agents. I'm dealing on a daily basis. One thing that I've always made sure that I do, even to this day, of 35 years later from dealing with those, I always make sure I'm accessible to anyone and everybody, and I've always made sure I've done that. People don't understand that. Oh, you Paul from the telly, why are you speaking to me? Kind of, I make sure that I'm in contact with people, and I understand what's going on. And I think that, you can talk about, look, if you look at where we're campaigning now, the renters reform didn't get in, didn't make the wash up. I think how people think politically about MPs is most probably an all-time low. That's the reality. I can only talk about good things about my MP. I voted for her. Unfortunately, she lost the seat to Labour.
Are they below landlords, do you reckon, in their scale?
I think politicians would be. Yeah. They would be in the bottom 5. But my politician, she was great. I worked with her under the Renters Reform Bill. I said to her, I drove her name was Teresa Villiers, so I'm in North London. She lost her seat. And I met her twice, actually, and did a Zoom with her. And I told her 4.5 years ago, I said, we're going to have a rental stock crisis. Listen to me, and I was engaging with her. I was sat with her for 2 hours or whatever. And I became her property expert in my area, and she was reaching out. And she quoted me in the King's Speech. And I gave her 5 case studies of court delays. And she said, and she was part of the rebel Tory MPs. You know, that stopped there? Yeah. She was one of them, right? And she said, you can't ban Section 21 until you sort the courts out. You need confidence. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Angela Rayner said we're going to ban Section 21 straight away. I don't think they can do that. I think they want to ban it. And, of course, you've got to realise, politically, there's 11 million tenants out there. So that there's a lot of vote. And, you know, so I think that when it comes to campaign, I think the NRLA have done a really good job. I work closely with them. I see the work they've done. I think if laws are going to come in, and the whole point of levelling up was about levelling up under the Conservatives in 2019, was about levelling and making it a fairer play. And now you're going to see that more. You know, having tenant security, better decent home standard, more affordable rents, you know, but they need to work with landlords and realise that they're engaged landlords. I think that I worry about landlord panic. I think landlords have really got to see the dead over the detail because, you know, when Section 21 does go, I worry that if the messaging's not right and people can't get their properties back in the grounds and the court and whatever, you'll get landlords that will be whacking in more Section 21s. And that means that good tenants will be told to leave.
I think, Paul, that what it is people will just... I think people like, you know, me especially, I'm thinking, no matter what is said to who about the most common sense, easily visible stuff that's going to happen, it's like, okay, we're just going to have to let it happen and let the wheels fall off. And then someone like Farage will get in and go, yeah, well, this is what we should have been doing, and put it all in place, and then it'll start to work again.
Well, actually, Farage has said he will ban Section 24. He'll reverse it.
Yes.
I did GB News with him. It was last year, I think. Was it last? I can't remember. He's a landlord, actually, and he said, Paul, and he knew about Section 24, and he was telling me, so it was actually really, really nice chap to speak to and stuff.
I think it's great.
But I think that, look, at the end of the day, we're just going to have to run with this term, see what happens. I would say don't fear Labour. Just hear a lot of their policies make really good sense. They really do. You know, about stopping bidding wars with tenants. Well, I think that makes total sense. We wouldn't be in that situation. Stopping discrimination makes total sense. Banning Section 21, that was cross-party anyway, even before Labour got in, so that's going to happen. Reforming planning makes total sense. EPCs, the Green Deal, they've pushed that back to 2030. That's better news for landlords. So I think there's lots of stuff. But landlords need to be informed. They need to listen to podcasts like this. They need to go on websites like Landlord Zone. They need to be members of the NRLA. They need to come to property, property networking events like yours. You need to keep informed because landlording is a very solitary business, and it's always good to have a mentor, have someone you can reach out to.
Real lonely. Sometimes
it can be lonely.
Yeah, really.
My phone's always there for you, Paul.
Thanks.
Right, thick and thin, you can call me, but not between the hours of
Yeah, but I mean, this is we love doing the property thing, don't we? Because we get a load of property fruitcakes in the room at the same time and crying each other's shoulders.
But we're good people. And we care.
Yeah, do you know?
I think landlords care. That's the key.
Well, most do. I think it's the media, doesn't it? Creates the fear.
I mean, there's a lot of shit landlords. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, but they're the ones who you mentioned it about. Your reviews, the good reviews on your website and all of that. We don't care about them. We only hear about the bad ones, don't we?
Yeah, well, that's right. I think that with Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords, I liked the fact I worked with the local authorities. That it was Harrow and there was a couple of other and Lewisham, whatever. Those landlords are criminal landlords. Some of them would be naive. Some of them will take massive advantage of subletting and I mean, I was on that. I've been on 3 or 4 or 5 working groups. When the Section 21 came in, I gave evidence on retaliation eviction at Parliament and cross-party and never even heard of retaliation eviction. I worked on the 6A form and 6 month lifespan and not serving after 4 months. They were my ideas. Working on the HMO on the room sizes, I was on those. When there was a rogue landlord and a rogue letting agent list, I was on that work. I turned around and said to the government, I had shelter sitting opposite me, didn't go down well. I said, let's have a rogue bad tenant database. Obviously, that creates more homelessness. That won't ever happen. So it's better to be sitting at that table, being passionate, shaping your views.
Yeah.
Someone that's been doing, and that's with the NRLA. They speak to members. We shape the views. We try and make it better for our industry. It's better to be at the table than not at the table.
I've actually, so I have to say it myself every day at the moment. It's all about resilience, and we used to have an expression in the Navy. A bloody war and quick promotion. Lots of landlords are leaving it. It's going to make it probably better for us in the long run. I'm just like holding. But it just feels crazy. But the sun might come up soon. I don't mean to dribble on like a septic eyeball, like I'm, world's smallest.
I'm going to go and slip my wrist now, Paul.
Yeah, mate.
This would be a lively podcast.
Again, if it was, if it was fair, mate. But
we tell it how it is.
A lot of people are offended by the truth. I've got this thing about being offended by the truth. It's like if I go around to a tenant's house or even speak to an employee about something that they are blatantly doing or has blatantly happened, and sometimes I feel like you've got to, put it on a velvet cushion wrapped in gold foil to be able to get them to sort of accept what it is that they've done. Yeah. And it's about leadership in a way and negotiation skills. But like, I was went to a private school, and then I was in the Navy and, non-commissioned officer and all that kind of stuff. And when I got out of the Navy, I just was really quite shocked by how offended by the truth some people can be. It's like, actually, I've just got you in to talk about this particular thing. And, it's like you're all the twats under the sun. And that's like when you go to someone's door and say, look, you haven't contacted me for 3 weeks and da-da-da. That poor guy, going back to him, the shit that he took, it's an automatic, here's the landlord. Sometimes the tenant's problems become your problems. Their changing circumstances becomes your changing circumstances, which is understandable. But if there was a bit more kind of respect out there for the amount of work that we do have to put in, you say to a tenant, sometimes you're all the twats under the sun because you're saying like, listen, you've got a £500 bond. I can get a decorator for 3 days. This place needs fully decorating, new carpets, da-da-da. So, and I've always said to people, look, can you just pay me £10 a week off? Your bills are going to be 1,200 quid. Can you pay me £10 a week? And you're all the twats under the sun. Like, that's fair wear and tear. It's like, no, the fact that your dog's chewed the skirting boards is not fair wear and tear. And it actually says in your tenancy agreement you're not supposed to have a dog. So I'm trying to be chilled here. And by the way, what's the crack with pets coming in?
So I said, I can tell you that now.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually quite a good thing.
Right.
So, look, I represent my deposits as well. So, we had, over 12,000 adjudications last year. We protect £1.2 billion worth of deposits. Pet damage is not that high when it comes. Most of it is cleaning, wear and tear, 17%. Pet damage is actually quite low. Bearing in mind you've got 5 weeks now, and it used to be 8 weeks. So what will happen is, and again, I think a tenant, within reason, not a big Alsatian, a husky in a one-bed flat in a block, because you have terms of the lease and the head lease and the breach and all that type of stuff. But, I've got a dog. I'd be gutted if I couldn't keep my dog,
Absolutely.
And I think it's really good for mental health. And, of course, landlords have been able to charge more money for rent, with a family house, and tenants will stay longer.
And they'll pay the bigger deposit. And
actually, talk about pets. So what will happen is they are saying that I'm coming to your house, Anthony, and you basically turn around and say, I turn around and say to you, can I have a pet? And you say, yes, but you've got to take out pet insurance. And you can ask them to take out pet insurance, which is reasonable. And I think that's fair. I remember one episode, it's funny actually. I remember one episode, you talk about pets. I did, I'm allergic to cats, right? Can't breathe. I actually got asthma from a cat when I was 19. I had to give the cat away. So what happened was I turned up to this, this eviction. It was in Rushden near Northampton. And the guy, I think he had mental health issues, but he'd had about 10 or 12 cats. So when you do the letterbox thing, you put the letterbox and you go in there and fucking, I stream him. And then I turn around and said, we used to have a joke on set. It was just, you have to have a joke. I said, I'm not doing this eviction. I just walked down and I said, Paul, you got to do it. I said, I'm allergic to pussies. I can't do it. But But we went in there, and the property was in a real bad state. I mean, I've been in when you do evictions, and the landlord hasn't had access for a year, 2 years, and they go in there, and it's just absolutely trashed. I mean, hoarding's a big issue as well. Yes. I mean, we did a hoarder. It was really sad. It was a rent protected tenancy. It was in March in Peterborough. That's where the old outfit. I don't know if you've seen that one. Oh. And it was property, and she sadly passed away. And there was just a little pathway. We'd done quite a full hoarding, and the landlord went in. She was living next door, but she hadn't been in the property for years. She wasn't allowed in. And of course, don't forget, you've also got to realise landlords are very emotional, especially if they've lived in the property before. Yeah, so they get emotional. But yeah, you do. And I forget, because I've done so many, you know, and I have to be reminded. Maybe one day I'll write a book about my experiences. Now, I've written 2 books with Kate Faulkner called The Landlord's Friend. I think we've got another one. We should be looking at doing one in 2025, which will be a whole rewrite once. It'll be about legislation, but it's a book for landlords. And easy. It was like a 50-chapter book, so I need to do an update.
I've got to say, you won't believe what time it is.
How long were you speaking for?
The property thing starts in 10 minutes.
You're joking, mate.
I had a few things to ask, but yeah, we better really go and put our glasses on.
We've had a great time.
We'll have to have a part 2.
Have I been your best guest?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Oh, right,
okay. Yeah,
brilliant.
You've been our most gobbiest.
Good. I'm a cockney, and I.
You've been, I think, the most informative, certainly.
Good.
You've got more words in per minute than any other guest, which is fantastic.
Even more than you.
Yeah, and do you know what, mate? We're not a property podcast, by the way.
Brilliant.
I'll tell you that.
You did.
But we're a bit about fruitcake. So could we have like 5 minutes on how you've felt over the years? Have you ever gone into anxiety, depression? What's caused that? How have you dealt with it? That kind of thing.
I think great question. I'll open up on this. I think that my traits. I think I've most probably got something. I haven't been diagnosed. Everyone says that to me. My son says it to me, definitely. Mm-hmm. When I go. It's really weird because when you're at work, you know, you do something, you feel like you're a bit special, you know, and when you do TV, when you get a bit of an ego and all that stuff. When I go home and I see my son's 18, the first thing he goes to me when I walk in, he works for me, he calls me a big bum dosser.
Fair play.
He calls me a dosser. It's quite funny, actually. So it brings you back down to bed. I think that I've made loads of mistakes. I've been, you know, I'm very impatient and rash and whatever. I'm a bit mouthy. But I would say that I've never been depressed. I've had a lot of pressure on me from a young age for various different things. I've had to do family stuff and whatever. I would say that the one time I really struggled for me in recent times was COVID, the first lockdown. Because I'm used to travelling around, speaking to people. I love public speaking. I love training people. I love going out. It's a passion. I love it, you know. I'd still do it, you know, as well as being a board of a big company and managing it. But when I remember when we went in just quickly before we were going to lockdown, I said to our management staff, I said, you've got to engage with your customers. Right, and we do aesthetic insurance as well for practitioners. Obviously, they were closing down, and then of course, what happened in COVID? We had this stamp duty concession when everything went banana. You didn't know what's going on, but I couldn't go in, so I was at home, and then I started to build an extension. The worst experience of my life. Rushed into it, changed the build twice. Not had a builder that ran off for some money. Oh, it was just horrendous. Took my eye off the ball. And I'm in property. So I make loads of stupid mistakes, but I'm in property and I really kick myself there.
Yeah. Did you get the money back?
I got some of it, but long story, I can't say. I got some of it back, but long story. But I struggled and I thought, what is going on? Because I'm used to going out. And I admit, I used to go to my boxing gym and he used to open up for me and he made out I was a professional boxer. I could have got fined and all that. I hid in the toilets once because the police came and whatever, but that's another story. But I really struggled. And what I decided to do to get through that time, I decided to do an event like this every day. So I'd do a podcast, I'd do a Facebook Live, I'd do a webinar. I had one webinar. We had 2,700 people registered. We had about 1,500 people online because everyone was at home.
Oh, was that dogging one you did?
No, that wasn't the dogging one. I did one webinar it was really big because your kids are in pajamas for 6 weeks in the first lockdown, and I was doing a webinar. I think it was for Good Lord. It was about 250 letting agents in my front room. The building's going off, and my daughter came down during the live webinar. And she started doing that dance and flossing with me.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Dad, are we going to do that on TikTok now?" And it was like everything was quite real. So that was quite humbling. But I think I struggled because I thought, what's going on? This going on, and I started to question myself, and I realised how important family was and how exercise really helped me for my mental health, and I had to go out and do that. But yeah, I think as men, we really look. We just did our recent event called Rumble the Agents, literally on the 27th of June with Mickey Hazard, who's a Geordie boy. Actually, he's a Mackham, to be honest. And I shouldn't have said that. And he had a mental health charity called Legend on the Bench, which prevents people with suicide and mental health. And we raised money for that. And the biggest problem, especially with us men, is we don't chat to people.
Yeah, I just did a poddy last week with
it's really important.
Anthony Hutton, who has Never Chuck the Towel In project. And great things to talk about. And this is why, I want to bring more awareness to this kind of thing with 100%, this project.
Fair play to you, Paul.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm happy to speak about it.
I'm really looking forward to the curry tonight, because then we're going to get the really spicy stories.
More spicy.
Yeah, I don't really do spice, to be honest.
No, yeah,
I'm
but
a bit
we'll
mild,
get the spicy
chicken
stories
tikka
out.
masala. Yeah, oh yeah, but that's off camera.
Cool in the gang, yeah. Record him later on, mate. Anyway, thanks so much, mate.
Pleasure,
it's been
really
absolute
enjoyed
pleasure.
it.
Sorry about to hurry you along towards the end.
No, it's great.
Mate. We could
talk for
literally
hours,
do another couple of hours.
Over a pint on that, yeah.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you,
Cheers.
pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Cheers, matey.
Thank you, Sir Anthony.
Thank you very much.